Identify risks. What do we do when we identify risks? Well, we look for risks. We find them where we are. And there are all sorts of helpful tools and techniques and methods that can help us identify these risks. There are all sorts of prompts and memory joggers that can be used to identify risks. Maybe your organization has a risk checklist and you go through that checklist as a way to trigger your identification of risks. All sorts of ways. So let's take a look at what we do here. Our main goal is identifying and documenting both positive and negative risks that could affect the project. Now, a key method in identifying risks is to first of all identify the risk. After you've identified the risk, ask yourself, what is the root cause? Why could this happen? As you see on the screen, we've got a risk that states the technology for the hardware-software implementation project is more difficult than anticipated. Why would that be? Should be the question. That will lead you to the root cause. And you can see the cause is a poor understanding in client specs. Since you know that a poor understanding in client specs could trigger this risk, then you want to make sure that you have a more thorough understanding in client specs. So as you identify the risk, identify the cause, and also you want to know what that would do to the project. So identify the effect. As you can see here, it states, could adversely impact cost and schedule and result in rework. So the cause, the risk, and the effect should all be adequately identified as you go through this process. Let's take a look at the inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs for the process of identify risks. So to identify and document these risks that could affect the project positively or negatively, the first input we want to use is our project management plan. Because in your project management plan, you could have risks hiding. Your project management plan could be riddled with risks. Maybe a good job wasn't done in some of the project planning components, and now is the opportunity to unearth that, to find that out. So I'll hold no punches in saying every single component should be considered. Schedule management plan, scope management plan, change management plan, any plan should be considered. Now, I know the PMI have listed a specific few, but you do want to consider every aspect of your plan when you're identifying risks. Could risks be in your requirements? Could they be in your schedule? Could you have cost-related risks that you didn't previously identify? Now's the time to identify them. Resource-related risks, quality risks, even in your risk management plan. Your scope baseline, your schedule baseline, your cost baseline. All of these components could have hidden risks. So instead of sectioning a few of these out, I want you to think about every aspect of your project management plan as being fair game for risks to be found. The next input is project documents. Now, when we take a look at these project documents, again, you could have risks in your project documents. PMI, go ahead and list a few, but I would like you to remember it could be any document. Your assumptions need to be kicked for validity to make sure that they are valid. Your cost estimates need to be checked to make sure that they are intact and you didn't forget anything. Your duration estimates also need to be checked. The issue log, as you go through a log of issues on the project, you could find risks. The lessons learned register from previous projects could help you as a memory jogger for finding similar risks on a current project. Requirements documentation. You could have risks hiding in your requirements. So we want to go through our requirements. We want to go through our stakeholder register as well. We want to look for any type of risks that may be hiding in these documents. We take a look at our stakeholder register because we want to identify stakeholders that could help us identify risks. Stakeholders that should be in the room when we're doing our brainstorming or reviews of previous documents to find risks. Our next one here is agreements. If you are in an agreement with an external firm, a contract, you want to make sure that there are no risks buried in that contract or in that agreement. Things such as milestones and the contract type and acceptance criteria need to be identified. The sooner the better. Even after contract sign, still take a look. Of course, it's better to do this before sign, but if you're a project manager and you come on a project after contract sign, still check the contract. The next input here is procurement documentation. All manner of procurement documentation, whatever they may be, you need to examine those for risks. In addition to all of these regular documents, any procurement documentation such as seller performance reports and approved change requests and information about inspections that may have taken place, they all need to be reviewed for risks. Our next input is EEFs, Enterprise Environmental Factors. Now, these enterprise environmental factors could be published material regarding risks, commercial databases with risk-related information, checklist from an external source, academic studies within the area of the project, benchmarking results, and industry studies from previous projects. Our next one here is OPAs, Organizational Process Assets. The organizational process assets here could be project files, which could include actual data, organizational and project process controls, risk statement formats, and checklists from previous similar projects. Let's talk about our tools and techniques. You see 6 tools and techniques on the surface in Identify Risks, but there are a lot of sub-tools and techniques here. The first one is expert judgment. Of course, as you are trying to identify risks, you need to have expertise in that business area, the project area. Now, as you think about expert judgment, just be aware that we should be aware of biases of the experts. We could have motivational biases due to one reason or the other. We could have cognitive biases due to their perception of the risks. But whatever you do, you want to get experts on your team as you identify risks. Don't do it alone, project manager. Get those stakeholders, get experts. The next tool and technique is data gathering. Now, under data gathering, we have brainstorming, which makes sense. You use brainstorming to glean information from people. One of the best ways to do brainstorming is to categorize the brainstormed risks that have been found. You can use the categories in a risk breakdown structure as a framework for brainstorming and identifying these risks. The next one here, a bullet within data gathering, is checklists. You can have a checklist, an item or items from previous projects will jog your memory, will jog the memory of people who are in the room identifying risks. So it's a very effective way of identifying risks. We also have interviews as a sub-bullet under data gathering. You can interview experts, people on the team, stakeholders, to glean potential risks. The next tool and technique is data analysis. Data analysis contains a few bullet points I would like to go over. The first one is root cause analysis, RCA. When you think about root cause analysis, identifying the root cause, we could start off with a problem statement. For example, the project could be late. What could cause the project to be late? And you look for all of the reasons why the project could be late. Keep mining deep down below. Go for the sub-reasons. Find the root cause. That's one way that you can find root cause of a risk. You could also do it for positive risk. You could start with a statement such as, the project will be unbelievably early, or the project will be so significantly under budget. What could cause that to happen? Then you begin to mine for the reasons why that could happen. That's a good place to start your RCA. The next bullet under data analysis is assumptions and constraints analysis. And as the name implies, you are checking your assumptions and constraints for validity and completeness. We also have SWOT analysis here. SWOT stands for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You want to examine where you're strong in the firm, where you're weak in the firm, where there are opportunities within the firm or the project, and where there are threats. Now, I know I'm using project and organization interchangeably because you can do this for threats on the project. You can do this for opportunities on the project, but you can also do this across the organization, depending on which risks you're trying to seek. Are you seeking organizational risks or project risks? The next bullet here is document analysis. Now, we have so many plans and so many documents I mentioned that could be sources of risks. Well, we want to use document analysis to thoroughly analyze each of those documents to look for potential risks. We want to look for uncertainty. We want to look for ambiguity and inconsistencies. And we also want to look for anything that's a red flag, any indication of a risk, positive, negative, what have you. The next tool and technique here is interpersonal and team skills. A big one here is the ability to facilitate team members, stakeholders to glean the risks, to get the risks in an orderly fashion, to conduct a Delphi analysis, whatever it might be. You want to make sure that the person leading does have good facilitation skills. The next tool and technique is prompt list. A prompt list is a predetermined list of risks, and these prompt lists will help prompt people identifying risks to discover risks that may be on the project. A few of these prompt list frameworks talked about in the PMBOK guide are PESTLE, taking a look from the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental standpoint. You could have the TECOP, TECOP, technical, environmental, commercial, operational, and political framework. Or you could have the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. You could use all of those as frameworks for prompt lists, using those to find out, are there risks from a political standpoint? Are there risks from an economic standpoint? And so on and so forth. The final one here is a no-brainer. It's meetings. Yes, we need meetings for the team to meet, to brainstorm, to identify risks. We need meetings to meet with stakeholders and do the analysis that needs to be done, data analysis and data gathering and so on. Let's talk about our outputs. Big output is the risk register. Now, the risk register will end up being hidden. You'll find it in project documents, but I don't want you to lose sight of the risk register. It's a very important document in the world of the PMI. The risk register will first of all have the identified risks, the cause, the effect, but as time goes on, you begin to flesh out the risk register with qualitative and quantitative data and strategic data to deal with the risks. So what could be in our risk register? A list of identified risks, potential risk owners, list of potential responses to the risks. At this point, but remember, more is yet to come. The next output is risk report. Now, I know we are in planning, so when you think about risk report, think in the realm that we are right now, and also think about this being done in an iterative fashion. So in the initial risk report, you could have a report documenting sources of risks that we have identified, the most important drivers of the overall project risks, and also you could have a summary summary information of identified individual project risks. You could have the number of threats and opportunities that have been discovered. You could also have a distribution of risks across the various risk categories and additional metrics and trend information. There also could be more information in the risk report depending on the reporting requirements and what stakeholders have agreed they want to see in the risk report. And the final output is project documents updates. And when we think about these project documents updates, think about anything we talked about previously. They could all be updated here. The assumptions log, the issue log, the lessons learned register, and many more. And that concludes our review of identified risks. Hey folks, this is a loaded process. It needs to be digested and it needs to be reviewed. To be honest, a lot of the risk processes are loaded. I hear from students on the exam all day, risk was big, risk floored me, oh, I'm glad I studied risk. So you want to pay close attention to risk management. Definitely a huge topic.